This tragic love story you've probably never heard of changed Switzerland forever. Before the late 18th century, British travelers on the Grand Tour didn't love Switzerland. They complained about the lack of infrastructure, the ugliness of the people, and the inconvenience, among other things. And sentiments like this were common. Such uncouth rocks and such uncomely inhabitants. I hope I shall never see them again. And the breathtaking scenery? It just wasn't really a thing tourists cared about. Ruins, art, and culture were important and educative. Nature was not. But all that changed with this. Julie, or the New Heloise, the letters of two lovers at the foot of the Alps. And yeah, that title is a mouthful. Written by Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Yes, that Jean-Jacques Rousseau wrote a romance novel? It tells the story of two people. Julie is the 18-year-old daughter of a nobleman, and the 20-year-old young man never named but designated as sans-preux is her tutor. They fall in love and eventually become lovers, but then are prevented from marrying by Julie's father because of sans-preux's lack of nobility. This excerpt comes right before Julie and sans-preux spend their first night together, which will also be their last. Julie, my charming Julie, I see you, I feel you everywhere. I breathe you with the air you have breathed. You permeate my whole substance. Oh, come fly to me, or I shall die. It's not all steamy like that, though. Through their letters to each other and their friends, the characters discuss moral questions still relevant today, such as what do you owe society as an individual, and is it right to prioritize your own happiness at the expense of others? Can someone who has lost their virtue later go on to lead a virtuous life? What kind of life should humans strive to lead? What is owed to one's family? What are the limits of honor and virtue? And even such everyday questions such as how children should be raised, how a household should be run, or how a garden should be designed. The Swiss locations along Lake Geneva, far from being a backdrop, play a major role in the story. Rousseau's basic premise was that in more natural places, pure human virtues could thrive, unspoiled by the ills of city life. Key moments of the novel were thus inextricably linked with their setting. Julie and sans-preux fall in love in Vevey. They have their first kiss in a small wooded area in Clarens. Sans-preux contemplates suicide on the cliffs of Maillery, and a tragic accident takes place near the Chateau de Chillon. The plot was simple, but the book was revolutionary during a time when literature was written more for the head than the heart and centered on courtly love affairs that were hard for ordinary people to identify with. One of the first novels expressing the romantic sensibility that would come to define the 1800s, it sold like hotcakes across Europe. 70 editions were published between 1761 and 1800, and there were 15 editions of the English translation up to 1812. Since there weren't enough copies to fulfill the demand, booksellers would rent it out by the day or even the hour. Readers were extremely affected, as we know from the letters Rousseau kept. I dare not tell you the effect it made on me. No, I was past weeping. A sharp pain convulsed me. My heart was crushed. Julie was no longer an unknown person. I believed I was her sister, her friend. One aspect that added to the emotional appeal was that many readers thought the story and characters were real due to the way the book was framed by Rousseau. It was presented as an edited collection of letters, not a novel. And in the prefaces, Rousseau leaves it very vague as to whether the characters were real or not. In addition, many readers assumed that the unnamed male protagonist was in fact Rousseau himself. Add to that how passionately the real-life Swiss locations were described, and it's easy to see how readers could be misled. And it's also easy to see why readers who had been so affected by the book would want to visit its setting for themselves. Rousseau himself urged them on. I would willingly say to those who have some taste and who are sensitive, go to Vevey, visit the country, look over the landscape, take an excursion on the lake, and say whether nature has not made this fine country for a Julie, a Claire, and a sans-preux. And that's just what his readers did. Early guidebooks like this one made sure to include these stops in their itineraries. Guidebooks even included literary plot points from the book. But this wasn't really necessary since tourists often traveled with the 6 volumes of the book in hand. One of these tourists was the poet Lord Byron. The story of Julie and Saint-Preux even inspired him so much that he included references to them in his own poetry. These poems, along with Byron's celebrity, attracted even more tourists to the region. The Romantic movement of the 19th century wholeheartedly embraced the Rousseauian view of nature as being a place to restore oneself and a site of pure emotions, contrasted with the inauthentic experience of life in the city. And we've never looked back. To this day, much of the rhetoric around tourism in Switzerland revolves around the restorative aspects of nature and the feelings you experience while in nature. And what happened in the end to Julie and her Saint-Preux? Julie goes on to marry a much older man chosen by her father, and they have children. Saint-Preux undertakes a voyage around the world, but they meet again years later. Although Saint-Preux comes to stay with Julie and her family for an extended period of time and the two are still in love, they hold fast to their sense of virtue and remain friends only. Not long after Saint-Preux leaves, Julie's son slips into the lake near the Château de Chillon. Julie jumps in to rescue him, but nearly drowns herself, and the shock and strain weaken her. On her deathbed, she writes to Saint-Preux one last time. I leave you not, I go to await you. The virtue that separated us on earth shall unite us in the eternal abode. I die in this flattering expectation, only too happy to pay with my life the right to love you still, without crime, and to tell you so, one more time. No one reads this work anymore, and hardly anyone in the general populace has heard of it, at least in the English-speaking world. And in all honesty, its 600 plus pages are a tough read by today's standards. But its legacy is fascinating. It played a huge role in changing Switzerland's image, which kickstarted Swiss tourism, especially among the Brits. It also was one of the first examples of literary tourism in general. It was one of the forerunners of the Romantic literary movement, and its ideas have even been credited as influencing the French Revolution. Not bad for what, at its heart, is a simple love story.